Plants throughout human history seem to have these images, evil, dark, and dangerous. They seem to have got this bad impression and are consequence. There's definitely something odd about them, but just because they're odd doesn't mean they're bad. Bats are actually quiet, fascinating animals. The more you get to know them, the more fascinating. Now the most social creatures you see them become. And some are actually really beautiful, but that's good character viruses they carry. And unfortunately, here right now, it's very strange. We probably got a bat virus that's killing people.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Lumapa. When COVID-19 first surfaced at the end of 2019, scientists around the world wants to know where it came from and how this deadly virus ended up in humans. Although the answer are not still certain, it seems likely the coronavirus originated in bats. Bats are diverse in ancient creature, and they've been actually been on Earth longer than we have. Despite that, there's still a lot we don't know. Tonight, we take a look at this enigmatic animal and dig into the mystery of COVID-19. In the last 20 years, some of the deadliest virus outbreaks have come from bats. SARS, Marburg, Ebola. So what's about these creatures and the way they spread pathogens that can be so dangerous?
It's the fact that the bats tend to carry a higher proportion of viruses that have ability to infect people. The question is really, why do we have some of these incredible and viruses coming out of bats? The fact that bats are carrying viruses is not in and of itself extraordinary. Every animal has its normal suite of viruses and bacteria that it normally carries. I mean, people do as well. We carry viruses, we carry bacteria, the majority of which are or beneficial, some of which cause disease.
It was 7 o'clock p.m. on December 30, 2019, when a package arrived at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In it, medical samples from a local infection disease hospital. Several patients there were suffering from a typical phenomena. Doctors suspected a possible novel coronavirus. Dr. Shi Zhang's cell phone rang shortly after.
Got a call from her boss who said, "Drop whatever you're doing and come back to the lab right now."
Dr. Shi is known in China as the Bat Woman. She's one of the world's leading experts on bat-borne disease.
She's the director of the Center of Emerging Diseases at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It is a biological level for facility. Biological safety 4 level research is certainly the highest level of containment that exists for studying pathogenic viruses.
Dr. fears the cluster of atypical pneumonia patients and one might be infected with the same family of viruses that caused the 2003 outbreaks of SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome.
More and more people were getting infected, and we started to see on China's social media in particular that concern was growing.
In New York, EcoHealth Alliance, a non-profit organization devoted to tracking emerging disease, began to take notice.
We started to make out first inkling that something unusual was happening by looking into social media in China. They mentioned that there was an unusual cluster of respiratory disease going on, and I remember talking to Peter Daszak about the potential that this might be another SARS-like event.
Peter Daszak is the president of EcoHealth Alliance. He's worked closely with the Wuhan Institute of Virology and Dr. Shi. Their collaboration was crucial, discovering the original of 2003 SARS outbreak. The World Health Organization assembled a team including the SARS. Dr. Shi and Linfa Wang, considered one of the world's top emerging disease experts to find the source of deadly outbreak. These virus hunters were pursuing a theory that bats could be the origin of SARS. The team headed to the Yunnan region of southern China to try to solve the mystery of SARS.
She and the team of researchers started exploring caves in southern China, looking for bats that could have been origin of bird SARS outbreak.
Dr. John Epstein was a researcher on the expedition.
We walked in the caves, it could carry the next pandemic. I mean, that's a risky thing. What we do is we go in during the day to scope out where the bats are and try and work out what species are in there. And then what we do is we set our nets up outside and catch bats as they fly out in the evening and go back in the morning. We do everything we can to ensure safety and well-being of the animals. And we have a basis of the samples to collect oral swabs, we collect paper pellets, we collect blood, we take measurements. Over the course of 8 months, they sampled caves all over southern China, and then they took all these samples back to the lab. It really took the better part of 8 years of persistent sampling, testing different horseshoe bat population around until we finally found the missing link we were looking for.
That link was a bat virus genetically connected to SARS and compatible of jumping directly from bats to humans.
And that really was the nail in the coffin for us in terms of this virus coming from bats.
That same year, the Chinese government approved the construction of the Level 4 lab, first in China. It opened in 2015 and it's rated to study the world's deadliest virus.
This E4 laboratory will mainly be used for research on highly pathogenic infectious diseases, and for which there are currently no medicines or vaccines.
Flash forward to the end of 2019, that's when the team in Wuhan began to investigate the struggle new viruses. The genetic sequence of the virus was mapped fairly quickly. Dr. Shi compared it to a database of 500 new coronavirus previously identified by Echo Health aliens. There was a match. Its official name became SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19 called COVID-19 because it emerged in 2019. The new coronavirus was 96.2% similar to a sample taken from a horseshoe bat in 2013. So what does this mean exactly?
Well, 96% is a different virus, so it's a bit like difference between us and chimpanzees. So, different species of ours. But what is tell us where the virus probably came from? It means that the SARS-CoV-2 probably came from bat, and probably in southern China.
Wuhan is 1,000 miles away from the southern subtropical region of Yunnan province. Dr. Shi says the coronaviruses have the greatest risk of jumping from animals to humans.
Most of the coronavirus that she had studied had been in southern China, and Wuhan is the central China. When she first found out that there was a coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan, she did initially wonder, is there some chance that it could have from her lab?
The Wuhan Institute of Virology is just a few miles from where many of first cases were reported.
Dr. Shi was facing this mounting pressure that's very alarming, particularly for those who work within that lab. She and her colleagues immediately isolated the virus sequence, tested its behavior, and she was very relieved when she discovered that it didn't come from their laboratory. This virus has never been seen anywhere in the world.
As her team raced to find answers, the disease was spreading fast.
When the Chinese Minister of Health announced that community spread was rampant in Wuhan and that asymptomatic spread was occurring, that meant that disease was out of control.
The Chinese government said, we traced the source of the new virus to the western edge of seafood market in Wuhan, where wild animals were being sold and slaughtered food and medicine.
I can think of better place to be a virus than a wet market.
16 years before the Wuhan outbreak, animals traders in Guangdong caught the original SARS virus also in wildlife market.
The viruses take hold, they swap around, and then people come and breathe it in and get exposed to it. That's how viruses spill over. In Wuhan, the initial cluster of 41 cases of cyberpneumonia, about half of those patients had been to the market or worked in that market or had some degree of contact with it.
The Chinese government shut down the market. Early on tried to keep information from spreading, communicating little about the early cases.
Not only was it shut down, it was also cordoned off. You had police at nearly every corner.
Months later, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention announced that while the new virus was found in several locations at the Wuhan market, all the animals they sampled tested negative. Since then, other theories about the possible source of the virus have emerged.
One of the theories that has circulated is that this originated from a wildfire trapper, somebody that has brought in and out this wild creature into the market for sale. The only information we have from the investigation of the Wuhan market was that environmental samples were collected, and of about 580 samples that were collected, about 37 of them came back positive for SARS-CoV-2 for this virus.
Dr. Einstein says the jury is still out whether the Wuhan market is ground zero for COVID-19, but he agrees the wildlife market are breeding grounds for the next bio-disaster waiting to happen. Why would not China just shut down the market that are selling exotic species or animals?
The population of southern China has been doing this 5,000 years. They don't just close it down overnight.
Commercial break!
Scientists believe COVID-19 may have had its roots in community of horseshoe bats in southern China. This particular bat represents a very small subset of horseshoe bats, all named for the shape of their noses. There are actually dozens of varieties of horseshoe bats, living in a number of places including the temperature and tropical regions of southern Europe, Africa, and Asia. In fact, there's incredible diversity among bat species. Bats can be found living all around the world, on every continent except Antarctica. However, the diversity and unique abilities advance is also what makes them too content with when it comes to disease. They're the only mammals capable of actually flying, so they can easily spread viruses to other animals.
Some bat species actually migrate thousands of miles, and hence the viruses that they carry traffic along those migratory routes.
And though some of the pathogens bat play host to can make them sick like rabies, they also have the unique ability to host and withstand some viruses without getting sick.
Understanding how bats coexist with diseases is very critical. Bats have very unique relationship with pathogens generally. They have unique biology and it allows them to coexist with pathogens in different ways. Bats are ancient species. They have been on planet Earth for a long time, and that means that they've had a long history of being exposed and adapting to viruses in nature.
Another theory involves their body temperatures.
A lot of people have come up with this sort of answer solutions. Like maybe it's because they fly, and when they fly, their body temperature gets a little higher. So it's like a fever, and that gives them the ability to handle more viruses than other kinds of animals would.
Dan Riskin is an evolutionary biologist and TB host. He did his PhD work on bats.
When the virus gets into a human and the human responds by producing a fever, which is really effective and against of a lots of viruses, it just doesn't work on this bat once, because they're used to those warm temperatures anyway.
So if the virus already used to high temperature because the bat that rising the fever in the human may not be infected to kill off this virus.
Exactly.
Some bats also have the ability to trap their body's temperature very low in the winter, so perhaps that also helps their unique immune system. Normally, the pathogens stay hidden in bats' bodies, and they've been known to make the jump to humans. So how do humans get infected? That's what's known as zoonotic spillover. When disease cross from animals to people, sometimes that spillover occurs between an animals and a human. And then transmission going forward in human to human. That's called community spread.
Perhaps the best example of that would be HIV. The transmission happened from primates to humans many years ago, and now it's transmits in human-to-human transmission.
COVID-19 is another example, but you can also have a disease that stays in a particular type of animal, which then acts as a reservoir. If that cause, humans are usually infected by an animal, not another person like with rabies.
Sometimes viruses are carried by mosquitoes, and the mosquito might bite an animal that carries that virus and then bite a person and transmit it to like flying syringes.
No matter how a disease make a transmission from a wildlife into humans, one thing is consistent. There has to be contact. Einstein oftentimes, it's through indirect or accident exposure. And animals that infected may contaminate food or water that people are eating, and that's why they get exposed.
And with these big open markets, there's a lot of people. So that's a very conductive environment for virus cross species transmissions events. It's an opportunity for animals that might never have contact with each other naturally in the wild, being artificially brought into a highly dense, congested, and unhygienic situation.
How do things spread from bats to other humans or other animals? Just through dropping or eat?
It probably varies from any one case to another.
Typically, bat sheds viruses the same way humans do, in saliva, urine, and feces. If a bat's highly stressed and sick, that is shed more virus.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the issues with these wet markets. For bats, they have coronavirus that they adapted to, and they're totally fine. But if you put them in a wet market situation, they get sick, they get stressed, they scamp just like if you work too hard, and you suddenly come down with the flu. The bats get overworked.
Sometimes with zoonotic spillover, it can also be an intermediary animal. So bats transmit it to another species, and then that species transmits to human. In case of COVID-19, as of now, no one can say sure for how it ends up in people.
All the evidence we have suggests that this is a virus originated in bats and made its way into people through a natural process.
But at this point, the greatest risk of getting COVID-19 is from another humans, not bats.
Really, what matters is the way that we interact with bats. Most epidemics are driven by humans' behavior. Doesn't matter that these viruses are happily existing in a wild animal in the middle of the forest. When people encroach in that environment, we're creating opportunity for a bat virus to get into a people.
Commercial break!
They account for approximately 20% of the world's mammal species. How many species of bats are there?
1,421 is the latest count, but we add the last 20 new species every year.
So there are still species of bats that have never been
Yes,
discovered.
yes.
Nancy Simon is the coordinator of charge of mammalogy at the American Museum of Natural History. Why are bats nocturnal?
Well, the thought is that actually the ancestors of all mammals were probably nocturnal. Small animal sorts of scurrying around when an aged dinosaurs. It gives them access to resources that other animals like dinosaurs couldn't use. So bats basically just never give up that lifestyle whereas ancestor for us primates. At some point, give up the nocturnal lifestyle to be diurnal.
But working at night, I mean, it's how the bats howl.
If you think about what the animals are that are active in the air during the day, it's bird. And by being active night, bats are not competitive directly with birds. So the bats basically fulfill all the same ecological rules that birds do, only they do it at night.
Bats are unique mammals. Structurally, in some ways, they're similar to humans. So bats have four limbs. Two of them are attached to the wings.
Two of them are the wings?
Are the wings?
Yes. They have all the same bones that humans do. And the other arm, the forearm, there's two bones, wrist bones, and then the bones that support the end of the wing are long finger and hand bones.
Bats' living and eating habits vary wildly across the 1,421 species that exist. There's some that roots in trees, other under leaves, some in caves. Some bats eat insects, others fruit, or even fish and frogs. These species, there's some of them are living right next to each other.
The smallest bat in the world is this tiny thing in Thailand that weighs less than a penny. And that biggest bat in the world has more than a 6-foot wingspan. There's a bat that lives in the cloud forest of Ecuador that has the longest tongue of any mammal. This thing has a tongue that is 1.5 times the length of its body. So if you stick your arm straight out in front of you and imagine your tongue and can touch your fingers. It's 3 times that long, and it's so that you can get into a flower to pollinate.
Wait a minute. So relative to its body size, if I stick my arm out, if my tongue could go to the end of my arm, this bat tongue would go to more arms.
That's right.
There are a number of acute bats, including one dubbed the panda bat and another the Hakabu rasi. Tube-nosed bat, discovered in 2017, which made news for its resemblance to the former hairstyle of NSYNC, Lance Bass.
There's the Honduran white bat which look like a cotton ball. You've got your flying foxes that look like puppies, but then you've got some really weirdly ugly bats like wrinkling face bats. I like the ugly bats more than I like the cute bat.
It's a bat that only a mother and Daniel skin can love. Blood-feeding bats are bumper. Bats do exist, but there are only about 0.2% of all bat species. They live in Central and South America, and they prey on the blood of birds, pigs, and cattle.
Vampire bats are super weird among bats. They sneak up on a cow. They put their face up against the cow. They've got heat sensors on their nose to tell where the blood is close to the skin. They shave the area with their teeth before they cut. They lick the area to clean it. Then they make a little foot with their front teeth. And they put their jaw up against the hole. They lick, and they drink, and they pee. It's completely creepy. But who else does that? Something that.
I tell you, who else that does a serial killer does that? However, vampire bats don't kill their victim and just act like a mammal-sized parasite. I've heard you said that the weirdness of bats was scientifically interesting to you.
The faces of bats is a perfect example of that. If you take a bat with a weird flap on his nose and you think, well, it's just a strange looking adornment, it turns out that a lot of bats have food in their mouth when they're trying to echolocate. And it's really hard to shout if you've got giant fruit in your mouth. So they hum their echolocation. And that's nose left. That weird flap actually points the echolocation sounds where they want it to go.
Most bats navigate and hunt for food in dark using echolocation, in which they emit sound from their nose or mouth. Then listen to the echo that bounces that create a mind of their surroundings. Their often oversized ears also help. Some species of bats have such sensitive hearing, they can detect the sound of insect landing on a leaf or bats social animals.
It depends on the species. Some bats spend their whole lives pretty much alone. Other bats still mate for life. You have some species where there's a male and a harem of females, where she gets a mate with all of them, but they have their own sort of liking mind, and so they'll sometimes cheat with nervy males from other colonies. There's like a whole soap opera going on with bats when it comes to mating, by the way. Bat mothers are excellent mothers. I mean, imagine having a baby the weight a quarter of what you weigh, and then the baby holds onto the mother's nipple with its teeth while she flies around. So like I weigh about 200 pounds, and the equivalent would be if I took a 50-pound weight and put it on my nipple with the jumper cable and then just went for a run. It's just incredible what this mother do.
Wow, that's a visual that's going to be with me for a while. Dan.
Commercial break!
In North America alone, there are 46 different species of bats, most of which are small insects-eating varieties like the big brown bat and the little brown bat. But in the southeast part of the United States, in particular in Texas, there's an abundance of one species, the Mexican three-tailed bat. In fact, Bracken Cave just outside San Antonio is believed to be home to the single largest colony of bats in the world.
Every year, during the spring and summer, I think there's something like 30 million bats in this cave.
In the cave,
In the cave in the summer, there's so many bats that the local weather stations use their Doppler radars so they can see the cloud of bats coming out and spreading out over the landscape to catch insects.
really?
It takes hours for them because there's so many of them commuting basically from wherever they're sleeping during the day to where their food is.
And they go the same way each time.
Yes,
In an ecosystem, what role do bats have?
yes, they're really a critical key component. For instance, insects eating bats because they consume so many insects. They play a large role in controlling insect populations.
A normal-sized bat can eat up to 500 to 1,000 mosquitoes in an hour. Mosquito that might be carrying disease like Zika, dengue, or malaria. If you're in an area where there's a lot of mosquito and you see a bat at night, you should probably be thankful for those bats.
Absolutely.
And all the insect eating translate into big money, save for agriculture. The Mexican three-tailed bat of Texas, for example, each huge number of moths, protecting the corn crops of the region.
People have estimated that the financial impact of bats on the U.S. economy is that they're worth well over $1 billion every single year.
Really?
Yes, just in terms of how many pesticides we don't need to use and how much more food we get.
Bat pest control isn't bats only contribute to our ecosystem. The trappings of fruit-eating bats, particularly rainforests, help the spire seeds and regenerate trees and plants previously cut down. And that's not the only benefit.
Bat wrappings are full of nitrogen, so they're really good for crops, and there are all kinds of stories about these caves in the United States being harvested for fertilizer and then for explosive for the Civil War.
There are also bats that serve as the only pollinators of particular type of bananas, mangoes, and even cacti. The muzzle of the long-nosed bats are designed to fit perfectly inside the cactus blossom that only open the night. A cave which is used to particular that is pollinated by bats.
Exactly. I mean, who doesn't love Ephelia, right? I mean, just right there. That should be a reason enough for people to love bats. It's a cold-loving fungus that grows in the bat when the bats are hibernating in the winter time. And unfortunately, this has affected something on the order of a dozen different species of North American bats. In some cases, population have declined over 90%.
Really? I mean that huge.
It's Hodge. Yes, it's a terrible treat to bats. And ironically, it's a disease that we brought to bats. The fungus that causes this disease is identical to fungus that naturally occurs in Europe. And so thought is that it was simply brought over by people people. It was accidentally introduced into bat caves.
So while we're fighting a viruses that potentially came to us from bats, bats are fighting a disease that potentially came to them from us. In fact, no North American bats are known to have COVID-19. Among bats researchers, there's a concern that humans will give COVID-19 to bats.
Emerging infectious diseases can go both ways, right? We do know that some other animals are get COVID-19 instance. The tigers at the Bronx Zoo.
For now, most research involving handling bats across the US has been put on hold because currently humans are potentially the bigger threat to bats.
Commercial break.
For many of us, when we think of bats, we think one thing, rabies, the threat that viruses often misunderstood.
It's not very common for Americans to get COVID-19.
And George is a former White House advisor for biological threat defense.
In any given year, there's anywhere from 0 to 1 to 2. People might get infected from rabies in bats or potentially from foxes or raccoons or skunks.
Rabies had actually been around for 2,000 years. For most of that time, if you got it, it was death sentence. Without treatment, it's 99.9% deadly. One of big problem in Europe and the US used to wild rabbit dogs.
Ancient, medical experts developed a lot of odd ideas about how you would cure rabies. They used to believe that one way to stop rabies from killing you was to take a hair from the tail of the rabid dog and insert it into the bite wound. And this is the origin of the phrase, hair of the dog, which we talk about in the context of hangover treatment.
And along came Louis Pasteur. In the mid-19th century, he'd been working on a vaccine for years and eventually decided to try it out on a young boy who'd been bitten by a rabid dog. The vaccine worked.
Most of the cases in the United States do come from bats, but the risk is low. So unless you see a bat behaving very strangely, moving around during the day, in funny way, more than likely the bat won't be a risk to an individual. Okay, I'm coming, guys.
Joseph Angeli spent a lot of time answering questions about rabies because he spent every day around bats.
There you go, Oliver. Oliver is more fascinated with you all. Come on, you're going to take what you want. Go ahead. They all have their favorites, of course.
One is New Jersey Batman. Angeli became fascinated with bats as a young boy.
My father was a nightclub and restaurant and bar owner. I was destined to be nocturnal, and I used to very often accompanying my father to work. Every so often, I go outside, right before sundown, and I would see these animals flying around the street lights. And my father pointed them out to me, and he said, "Those are bats."
He quickly became obsessed and passed many childhood days in the Bronx full of glimpses of feared and wild creatures.
And the stigma attached to bats was just horrible. And I just felt like the animals that I was seeing in the person was not matching the description that people were giving me. Around the world, bats are a sign of good luck, fertility, growth, everything that you would think of bats are usually the opposite of what they're considered here in America.
As an adult, the Batman became the showman, as did the singer of the 80s glam metal band, Rox.
It was a very different world, although it definitely paralleled in the bat world because we were pretty much active at night and sleeping during the day.
Back then, in the early 90s, after attending a lecture on bats, Angeli decided to change careers.
I just started getting more and more into the idea of doing something for something else other than myself. The rock star thing is little megalomaniacal, but the bat thing was disguised need help.
Angeli decided to leave the rock world behind and and start working as an advocate for bats.
So when the baby bat is born, he goes to the side and clings underneath the mama's wings.
He became a licensed cryptologist, a person who studies bats and opened up the Wildlife Conservation and Education Center in New Jersey.
This is Claudia. Claudia is usually pretty tolerant of being handled. Each bat has a different personality, different behavior, sometimes even a different look to them.
Over the last 25 years, as an educator, of his goals has been to make people less afraid of bats. Because of that, he purposely chose to feature fruit bats native to Africa, Asia, and Australia. They are commonly known as the flying foxes.
They are more attractive and more appealing to people. You know, they look like my little flying two chihuahua, I call them. They just really are much easier to use as educational subjects and to get people's fears.
Angeli is part of a larger movement that's been taking place for the last 3 decades in the United States, teaching people why this creature should be protected, not feared.
We're all here for one purpose and for one target and one direction, and that's to help these animals and to help people understand why these animals need our assistance. They are so much like us. They are different looking, different colors, different sizes, different shapes, different importance, different jobs that they do. And I keep going back to that is really what I think. At the end of the day, makes me love them so much that they are like people. When life gets back to normal, go outside and look up and go find some bats.
Commercial break.
Every year, we as species enlarge deeper and deeper in the bat habitat, those of other wild creatures exposing ourselves to new and dangerous viruses. With the dramatic increases in travel and rising global trade, we're now incapable of spreading those viruses far and wide. Scientists warn to those that were created is perfect storm for a new pandemic.
We are without tough going so more epidemics like COVID-19 or perhaps worse, unless we really change the way that we're interacting with our environment.
The first major epidemic of 21st century was SARS in 2003. Other outbreaks quickly followed. 2009 it was H1N1 or swine flu. 2012 MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Then the large Ebola outbreaks in 2014, Zika virus in 2015, and now COVID-19.
They're increasing in frequency. They're coming quicker. They're going to spread quicker. They're going to infect more people. And they're going to cause more economic damage because we rely on that globally.
In a lab nearly 6,500 miles from Wuhan, researchers in Berkeley, California are looking to bats to find clues on how to help humans fight coronaviruses like COVID-19.
So I think in a way, there's actually a lot we can learn from bats. You know, this group of animals has been around for millions of years. How can we look at their history with viruses and take the knowledge and think about therapeutics and treatment to ourselves? What is it about that allows some of them to host these viruses without showing any illness?
That's the question that Kara Book is trying to answer. Brooke is a disease ecologist who began studying bats in Madagascar. In 2012, she and her colleague genius are investigating how the bat's immunity keeps them safe from harm.
I've always been fascinated by bats as hosts, sources of infectious diseases that transmitted to humans. In the case of certain bat species, they appear to be perpetually primed to fight viral infection.
Scientists believe that understanding a bat immune system can help develop a human battle plan for fighting this disease on a global scale.
It's an opportunity. What is it about bat metabolism, immunity, or physiology that they've got that we could use.
Brooke and her team infected the cell of two bat species with different viruses. Then, they watched as virus spread and the bat cells mounted a strong defense, different than what would happen with humans.
When a virus infects a cell, your immune response will recruit immune cells to the site to try and clear the infection. The signal to all sorts of cells that you have not become infected. A virus is here torn your defense system. Typically, this manifests as inflammation.
In humans, inflammation, oftentimes in the form of fever or swelling, helps fight infection, but too much or inflammation that goes on for too long can do more harm than good. It can even cause death.
Typically, more than half of the damage that results in disease tends to be the damage of the immune system attacking the host itself, and we call that immunopathology. When your defense go overboard, that's actually how the disease starts.
But bats' immune system don't respond the same way as humans.
It seems that bats are able to mount robust immune responses but not expense that inflammation. Species are actually missing the genes that we and other mammals have that trigger the inflammatory process. The same adaptation also favored them to carry virus. It doesn't appear that they get sick or very sick when they're carrying viruses that can be deadly in other people and animals.
So-called studying bat immunology help us humans create possible treatments to fight this current and future pandemic. What do you think is the greatest challenge in terms of finding a treatment or cure for the zoonotic virus?
Well, to my mind, the greatest challenge is the number of unknown viruses that are out there. I mean, we think there are about 1.7 million unknown viruses of the kind that can get into people. We've got to get ready for this, find out what they are out there, get vaccines and drugs that affect not just one we know about, but the ones we're discovering right now.
Bats already contributed enormously to research that could one day be helpful to humans. They've been studied to see how they combat aging because they tend to live longer than other mammals their size. Research on bat is also helping in the fight against cancer. Scientists are trying to understand why bats don't develop tumors like other mammals, and now the possibility that they could help to fight current and future coronavirus.
People are working on vaccines. They're working on drugs. That's the silver bullet. That's what we're looking for, and I see it as an opportunity.
Many people are surprised by the physiological similarities between bats and humans and the information that we may be able to extract from that. In addition to the anti-aging and cancer research studies, scientists have also been looking into the saliva of vampire bats. It's got special blood thinning agents, which help them siphon off their victim bloods. Scientists are looking to see if there could be blood thinning inside that will be helpful for humans. In the meantime, researchers agree that it's our job to protect this extraordinary creature and their habitat because, as we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, if we don't protect them, we're actually putting ourselves at risk.
It's caught in the crossfire.